Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ. The question I'm talking about today is something I've seen variations on throughout my years doing content here on YouTube, and that is what is harder, being a writer or being a translator. So at this point in my career, I have done a lot of translation work and I have done writing work as well. So I think I have a pretty good perspective on the difference between the two. The simple answer to the question is that I think that writing is a lot harder. The short reason is that writing is creating something. You have to use your mind and be creative, whereas translating, you are not actually being creative as much as you are when you're writing. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of hard work that goes into translating, and there is a lot of it that's creative because the translator has the choice of how to interpret the language, and they can be more literal, they can be less literal, they can put a lot of feeling into that translation that can change it wildly. If you've ever read something that's badly translated, or for instance machine translated, versus something that's been translated by an experienced translator, you probably know what I'm talking about. A good translator can really bring something to life and maybe even make it better. That does happen a lot of the times with the Chinese web novel translations because the authors make so much content so quickly that's primarily unedited, whereas the translators will sometimes put extra work into editing it, removing filler content, or sprucing it up in a way that just really brings it to life. That said, in my experience, the process of creating my own original fiction is a lot more difficult than translating the fiction of the web novel authors. There are obviously a lot of exceptions and caveats to this statement. For instance, if I was going to be translating ancient poetry in classical Chinese, that's a totally different beast than writing some cultivation fight scenes. So in the context of this video, I'm primarily comparing translating online literature from China and writing similar content in English. So let's go to my website really quickly to give some context. This is basically all of my major works, and on the original side, I have this, The Nine Heavens and 10 Earths, which is has been picked up by a publisher, is going to be relaunched under a new name later this year. So depending on when you watch this video, it might still be up on Amazon or it might be under a different name. That's an original fiction work. This right here is a non-fiction reference, which I don't think really even counts because it's so short. Basically, the Nine Heavens and 10 Earths series so far is a little bit over 200,000 words. Going down, Righteous Blood, Ruthless Blades is a tabletop role-playing game. That's not fiction, so I'm not really going to count that. Over here I have Legends of Ogregate, which is another original novel, a wuxia epic, and it is also about 200,000 words, maybe a little bit more. Then the rest of the things, including I Will Eternal, Sage Monarch, Seven Killers, Heroes Shed No Tears, Kung Fu, and Dragon King with 7 Stars are all translations. Some of them are licensed, some of them are unofficial translations, with Dragon King, Kung Fu, Heroes Shed No Tears, 7 Killers being unlicensed, unofficial. But with Sage Monarch, A Will Eternal, and up here, I Shall Seal the Heavens, all being licensed translations. If you add up the number of Chinese characters for these different translations, I Shall Seal the Heavens, The Will Eternal, Sage Monarch, and everything, it's about 14 million Chinese characters. That's an estimate. I didn't literally count every character, but I'm pretty sure it's roughly around there. And then estimating again how much that works out to in English words, I think it's about 8 million English words. To put that in context, Harry Potter is a little bit over 1 million. So I have translated the equivalent of the entire Harry Potter series 8 times over, basically. So in terms of the original fiction, I don't even have 1 million words of it yet, whereas I have over 8 million of translated fiction. So I think on just the raw time and energy spent, obviously the majority of it has been on translating. And what I can tell you is that when you're translating this kind of fiction, you get to know the author's style, you get to know the words they use and how they use the language, and the more you translate their stuff, the easier and easier it gets. When I first translated I Shall Seal the Heavens, it took me, I think it took me something like 4 hours to translate the first chapter of I Shall Seal the Heavens my first time around. By the time I got to the end of it, I was easily doing a chapter in an hour, maybe a little bit less. And by the time I got through A Will Eternal and Sage Monarch is a different author, but I was already so experienced that I got used to his style pretty quickly. And I could do a Sage Monarch chapter in under an hour, depending on the circumstances. Of course, there's more that goes into it. There's more that goes into it than that. There's research and things that happen. Occasionally, whether it's Sage Monarch or I Shall Seal the Heavens, there'll be situations where I run into some Chinese idiom that I haven't heard of or some religious term, and then I'll spend like 45 minutes researching it when I could have done an entire chapter in that amount of time, just about. As I got later in my translating career, I started a different way of translating where I would do all my research ahead of time. So I would read through it and make notes of things that I wanted to research, like those religious terms and whatnot. And then I would look them all up and have that all done before I actually sat down to translate. And so that would make the actual time spent on just the translating part go by much more quickly. In any case, the point is I have done a lot of translating, and in the novel series and this original novel, Legends of Orgate, combined roughly maybe 500,000 words almost. It's still a significant amount of writing, although not compared to what I've done on the translating side. And for me personally, it is just much more difficult to write. To give some context, if I'm going at full speed translating Chinese fantasy novel stuff, web stuff, as I just mentioned, about an hour is a good chunk of time that I can... About an hour is enough to get a chapter for the most part for me. So including breaks and stuff, because I couldn't just sit down and translate one chapter after another. Maybe if I did like some special marathon, I could do that and do a whole bunch of chapters in one day. But for me personally, I could generally do between 3 to 5 chapters a day. Each of those chapters being about 2,000 words. So on a good day, I could translate the equivalent of about between 6 to 10,000 words of content on the translating side. For writing, I am pretty much capped at 4,000 words per day. Again, if I did some kind of marathon and plan and stuff, I could probably do more than that. But for the most part, on a good day for me, I'm getting about 4,000 words done. So for translating, I can easily create double the amount of content that I would make if I was writing it on my own. In terms of the prep work and the post work, they're kind of not exactly equivalent, but similar. The upside to translating is that I don't have to outline my story. I don't have to create a world Bible. I don't have to, conceive the plot, and I don't have to have character sheets and all that different prep work that goes into writing a good novel. I don't have to do that for a translation. That said, I do have to do the research that I talked about before, looking up terms and idioms and whatnot. Another thing that happens on the post side is editing, but I would do editing for both of them anyway, regardless of whether it's a translation or it's a original work. I usually let it sit for a period of time, then I go back and reread it and rewrite it. Now the caveat is that for a translation, I'll usually only do that once. I'll probably reread and edit myself, then hand it off to somebody else to do proofreading and editing. Whereas with my own original fiction, I generally rewrite it multiple times. Sometimes between 5 and 6 times, maybe more, could be conceivably less depending on the circumstances. So I hope that this little background into my insight into writing and translating has been helpful to you. Hopefully it hasn't been too incoherent, as it's mostly just been kind of a stream of consciousness. But again, I'll reiterate that I think writing is harder. Not that I'm looking down on translators, because I am a translator. I've translated a huge amount. But if I was looking for something that was relatively easy to do throughout the day and not be as intensive on the mind, I would definitely pick translating. Again, I'll say it's not easy. There are many difficult things about translating. But at the end of the day, when I'm done with my work, having worked roughly 9 to 5, and I'm done with my work, usually I am more tired mentally from writing than I am from translating. So if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear your thoughts. Are you a writer or a translator or both? Do you have any insights? Please do leave a comment below. If you like my content, like and subscribe and all that stuff, and check the description box for ways to support the channel. I really appreciate every single comment, and I try to read them all and respond to as many as I can. So thank you everyone out there who does that. That's it for this video. I will see you next time. Godzilla.